Make no mistake about it. Returning to a manic state, going back into mania, is one of the most terrifying ideas to me. It's not something that I want to go through ever again. With that being said, I am also an ardent proponent of the idea that humor is one of the best medicines. At least for me, I found it to be an incredibly powerful coping mechanism, something that's allowed me to look back on my manic episode and put things in perspective and look at things in a lighthearted manner. And it really helps me, anyways, alleviate the significance of the trauma, alleviate the stressors, and abate the racing thoughts that accompanied the aftermath of this manic episode. I have a diagnosis of bipolar type 1 disorder, and for those who don't know what that is, it's a severe brain disorder characterized by different moods. And you can be in a high state, you could be in a low state. But unlike normal people, when we experience highs, they're what's often called high highs, and when we experience lows, they're called low lows. In this video, I'm going to be discussing when I experienced those high highs. More specifically, I'm going to discuss some of the humorous moments that transpired over the course of my manic episode. And trust me, there were many that we will be discussing in this video. There's so many more that for the sake of brevity I will not be discussing, but if this video does well and people want to see more of the stories, hear more of the stories that I experienced during my manic journey, then I can definitely do that in a follow-up. With that being said, why don't we get right into the first manic story, and that is I experienced insane levels of physical activity that were completely unusual for really any person. And one moment of this that really stands out to me is when I was living in a frat house and I went up to one of my fraternity brothers and he had asked me out of curiosity how many steps I had taken that day. And iPhones track the number of steps that you do. So I take out my phone, and the reason he's asking the context is because my brothers see me walking everywhere, all over the place, anywhere and everywhere, at all times a day. And so he asked, he was curious, how many steps did you walk today? And it's like 2 or 3 in the afternoon. I take out my phone, and it says something like 33,000 steps. I had asked them how many steps they did, the other two brothers in the room, and one of them was like 5,000, the other was like 7,000. And they just got those steps from going to classes and so forth. But during this period of time, I was incredibly physically active, and I would walk anywhere from 30 to 50,000 steps on any given day. And I'm not exaggerating when I say 50,000 steps. I would literally have 25 miles walked, according to my iPhone. And I think just the absurdity of that is funny in itself. Another thing that happened in relation to my fraternity, anyways, is that there was one particular night I tried to hold a press conference at midnight, and the context of this was I felt like there was lots of corruption within the campus and the different institutions around campus, whether it be Greek life or the administration itself. And my plan was to expose this. I made a post on the University Class of 2023 Facebook page, and it got 0 likes, whereas my posts in the past would previously get a lot of likes, hundreds of likes and engagement. This one got 0. Nobody showed up to the press conference. Who did show up to the press conference was a couple of police officers who I tried to conscript into being security for the event. Of course, that's absurd, and an ambulance ended up showing up, and I was taken to the hospital as a result. But before that happened, I remember talking to MI6 or something like that. I tried to get these esoteric forces to rescue me from the cops who were putting me in the ambulance and sending me to be hospitalized. It really made me angry, anybody who suggested that I was manic, which really goes to show that I lacked the insight to know that there was something wrong with me at this time. I went to the hospital, and overall I spent, I think, 5 nights, October 28th to November 3rd, and this was in 2021, something like that. And they had a suggestion box where patients could submit their ideas and proposals to improve the facility, or ideas for groups and so forth. I would write these lengthy 5 to 10 page responses, these 5 to 10 page essays, really, treatises, on things that need to be improved and how this is a crime and this goes against humanity. And there was one particular moment where I actually wrote a book about my achievements. I didn't put this in the suggestion box, but I brought it up to the person who has the authority to discharge me, and I mentioned a list of all the reasons why I'm not manic. And in it, I mentioned competitions that I won in high school that were completely unrelated. I talked about how I was in contact with a prominent military general who I would actually talk to over the phone while I was in this unit, which just really speaks to how crazy and out of it that I really was. So there was a suggestion box, and I can imagine what the reaction was of employees at this place looking at my suggestions. And they probably typically get like a little note or an index card or maybe a page at most of a suggestion. And I'm sending these 10-page essays. I always wondered whether or not they actually read them or not, or if these prolonged my stay. I think if they read them, it definitely would have warranted me staying longer. I ended up leaving the hospital, and one thing I did was, under these circumstances, I ran for every single position on the executive committee of my college fraternity. I lost every single race. I made totally nonsensical claims and promises in each of my 5 speeches. I ran for all 5 positions. I remember reaching out to brothers, asking them to nominate me for these different positions. It's not normal for someone to run for that many, maybe run for 1 or 2 at most in the hopes that they get one of them. But you're only supposed to hold one executive position. And I had this idea in my head that I would do all 5, that I would run for all 5 and win all 5. And I didn't win any of them because I just wasn't all there. In a previous lifetime, when I was stable and I actually held 2 positions, I was the social media manager, chapter historian. I probably could have got a position on EC, executive committee. But my health just so spiraled out of control, it just didn't make sense to put me in a position like that. People didn't want to stress me out, and they knew there was something wrong with me because I was so antagonistic and accusatory towards everyone. But I just thought that was a little bit of a funny moment that I ran for every position of executive committee of an organization of 120 plus people right after coming out of the hospital psych ward. It's kind of ridiculous. Over time, I developed this other delusion that I was related to the John F. Kennedy family, and this would entail multiple other delusions that accompanied it. It got so serious, it got to the extent where I actually developed a JFK accent. I would watch speeches of JFK and try to copy and implement his mannerisms into my own style of speech. And I actually have a video on my channel where I react to a video of myself speaking using that JFK accent, a video that took place from when I was manic. And so I remember messaging brothers saying that I'm related to JFK and that people are after me, the Illuminati's after me, they're trying to whack me just like they did JFK. And it's all because I know everything and I'm trying to expose the corruption and they need to get rid of me. I mean, it is what it is. Looking back on it, I can't help but laugh because it's just so ridiculous that I believe these things, but it really speaks to how serious this condition is, the gravity of bipolar disorder. Eventually, I developed religious delusions, and there were a couple interesting reactions I had as a result of this. Well, there were a lot, but a couple that I'm going to talk about. One was that I met with the Catholic father in my local community, and the context of this meeting was I wanted his assistance in getting help from the people who were coming after me. I mentioned during that meeting, we talked for about 20 minutes or so, and towards the end I had mentioned how I was related to the Kennedy family, and that's why they're after me. And it really shook him to the point where he got up, he went to the door, opened it, and he said, "I'll see what I can do for you, Tyler." And so I left, and as soon as I left, walked out the door, he shut it and locked the door. But telling a Catholic father that I'm related to the Kennedy family, just another one of those weird, interesting things that took place during my manic episode. There was another moment where I actually tried to conscript, lots of attempts to conscript people. But I walked into the Baptist church, the same one that I had actually accepted Jesus as my Savior many years earlier. And I told the pastor, the priest, whatever the title is for a Baptist preacher, I said to him that you may not have known this, but God and the devil are actually great friends. And I remember like hearing audible gasps in the room from people who were like so bothered by what I said. And he said, "Wow, really?" He like kind of, I think he knew something was wrong with me and he didn't want to offend me. I also tried to get him to go to my college town with me to confront someone who I believed was one of the agents after me, who I believed was a Nazi agent. This actually happened on a night where I had rented a Hummer limo. I was at my family's and I devised a plan to confront this brother of mine who had betrayed me and who was a Nazi agent. And so I rented a Hummer limo. My family was totally shocked when it showed up. And I referred to this Hummer limo on social media as the Holy Caravan, my Holy Caravan. And I went home to try and once again conscript a bunch of people to join me on my journey to confront this corrupt brother, this dangerous brother. And that was the night that I tried to conscript the priest. I ended up going to McDonald's where I ordered 4 large iced coffees, and yes, I consumed every single one of them. I tried to hire the driver as my personal driver, and he said he'd consider it. And then he brings me to a Catholic church reactory, and at this church reactory, I went inside, I saw the guest list, I signed myself in as Jesus, and then left a note with my phone number attached. The note said, "I'm back." And I left like some note saying like, "Call me when you get a chance." I left a note for the Catholic Father. Another one of those moments where I can't believe what people actually thought when they looked at that. Like, someone signed their name in as Jesus? What blasphemy. Look at the cameras. We need to figure out who this was. No. Although I'm embarrassed and I have not stepped back in this church ever since then. I haven't stepped back in either of these churches where I interacted with the leadership because I'm just so embarrassed. Despite being a religious person, I just don't have the confidence to go back into these particular churches. I found a new church, and that's a different story. I digress. Another wrenching ordeal was I started to become increasingly political. I would make all these political posts online. I figured these people were after me. I was trying to expose corruption. No one was believing me. People were alienating from me. Under these conditions, it made total sense for me to go into politics, right? Well, I ended up appearing before the local board, the town of selectmen in my town. I was applying to be appointed to the Economic Development Committee. I have a video on my channel where I react to the footage of me at this town selectman meeting. And you can very clearly tell that there's something off about the way I talk, something off about the things I say, but that apparently evidently did not matter to the town selectmen, who by a 3-1 margin voted in favor of appointing me to the Economic Development Committee of my town. So while I was in full-blown mania, in psychosis, I get appointed to a government position. And now that I think about it, maybe I'm a little bit less crazy than the stable politicians we have in office right now anyways. I'm not referring to any specific one, but just like in general, like all politicians. I'm kidding, but I just think it's so crazy how I got into a government position while I was manic. It still blows my mind. It makes me think, imagine the things I can do when I'm stable. If I can do that while manic, imagine what I can do when I'm actually coherent and cogent about the things that I say. The last thing I want to mention that I think is pretty humorous is that I ended up posting over 50 different rant videos to my YouTube channel, all of which I have privated now with the exception of a few where I react to the footage of them. I was manic while I filmed these rants and I uploaded them. All kinds of different stuff. So like I have a few examples here that I wrote down. One was titled, "Far-right news anchor visibly drained over not being invited to Boris Johnson parties." And then I have another one called "David Pakman doing Red Scare." Another one, "Why I support building a wall around Florida." And then another one, "Deport libertarians to the moon." And in these rant-style videos, there's nothing coherent about anything that I say. I'm really all over the place. I can't maintain any type of intellectual consistency in what I say. So those were just some of the many moments during my Manic episode that I think were a combination of hilarious as well as terrifying. Hilarious because of the absurdity of the things that I had said and done. Terrifying because I think there were many points where there was opportunity for something to go terribly wrong. For example, if I had confronted that brother and actually, I don't know, attacked him or whatever it was that I had intended to do, that could have ended up really badly. My interactions with everybody could have really taken a turn for the worse. And to this day, I'm bothered by the things that I said and did. Although I'm doing better now, I understand that it was an illness, not my character, that was the product of these incidents. Sorry. But yeah, I hope that in sharing this video, I shed some light on the type of delusions that someone with mania and psychosis can experience. It's important to understand mania really does manifest differently in different people. In my case, I definitely had many of the extremes, from believing that I was JFK to believing that I was the Messiah to believing the Illuminati was after me to having these delusions of grandiosity to having hallucination phone calls with a military general that did not exist while I was in the hospital. I could go on and on. But I want to thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this video, if you found anything interesting, if you found anything humorous, I'm curious, what did you find to be the most humorous of the incidents that I shared? Which one do you think was the most terrifying? And for those who have bipolar or who know someone with a condition, if you have an example you'd like to share of something extreme or unordinary that you did during your episode or that happened during another's, that you want to share, of course maintaining confidentiality. If you feel comfortable sharing, then please do share in the comments. I'm curious to hear what similarities or differences others may have in their own respective stories and experiences. But with that being said, I hope that you'll consider subscribing if you're new. For returning viewers, appreciate each and every one of you for being here. I want to thank you all for watching. Love, light, and tranquility to all.